Welcome back to the show. Hello, everyone settling into this space. I'm Devi Brown. This is Deeply Well. And this episode is just you and me. We are going to dive deep into a couple things that I've been thinking about and a couple experiences that we've been having. And we will close this episode in a very light, grounded breath meditative practice. Wherever this episode is reaching you today, I hope that your heart is full. And if it is not, I hope that it's open to release, open to receive. All right, I want to talk about a couple things that have been happening in the world. One of those things that has taken this world by storm in a way that I really was not expecting. There's been some beef afoot. So I know everyone has heard about this. Kendrick Lamar, the GOAT, and Drake. Big beef energy. Not just big beef energy, but where it landed, especially with some of the records like Family Matters and Meet the Grams. I mean, we have crossed the line from beef into sworn enemy territory. The way that situation has been unfolding, I was looking at it and I was like, my goodness, this is now turned into something for the lineage. This is now turned into, a karmic kind of experience that they may find themselves battling for a few lifetimes. We saw it in this lifetime on records, and next lifetime it might be on a battlefield. It might be David and Goliath. It might be all kinds of things. It's been really interesting to watch the way the world has been unpacking this situation and been unpacking the music. I mean, goes without saying, Team Kendrick all day, 100 million%. I don't know how to make that even more concrete. Team Kendrick all day and night. I've been watching, I look at everything kind of through symbolism and just through kind of like, what is the bigger arc? Like, what is the bigger plot? What is the bigger archetype that is coming through in whatever individuals I'm observing? And in the situation with Drake and Kendrick, it's been really fascinating to see. And all of this is 1,000,000% my own opinion based on the way I uniquely see the world and experience the world. And, I had the vantage point of previously working within the music industry and working within radio. And I was a fly on a wall for the beginning of both of their careers. I remember it like it was absolutely yesterday. I'll never forget the first time I heard So Far Gone, which was a monumental, impeccable, incredible project. And I remember at the time I was on the radio and I got suspended because I believed in that Drake mixtape so much that I secretly programmed it into overnights and played the records. And none of the records were cleared. And Drake at that time, if you Googled him, nothing actually came up. But I remember being so incredibly moved by that project and by his talent and his gifts and his writing and everything that was talked about on that project just felt so resonant to where I was in life. And it was incredibly inspiring. So that was kind of my first experience of Drake. And I was at his very first show that he ever did, which was at Cal State LA, I believe. His first LA show was at a college in the auditorium. And I remember being at that show and on the flip side of that, K-Dot, one of the best to ever do it, LA's anointed son, one of the most gifted, incredible artists and people that we have in this lifetime and in this generation. One of the first projects I loved from K-Dot was the Kendrick Lamar EP, which I don't even know if that's like accessible or findable anywhere. But I remember watching Kendrick start to make music and watching him begin to embody his artistry in LA very, very, very young. One of my earliest memories of his art was actually being at this teeny, tiny, tiny, tiny show. There might have been 50 people there in Long Beach in a bar. And J-Rock was actually performing. Shout out to J-Rock. And Kendrick was his hype man for the performance. And I remember even in that moment, there was a light that shined on his life that was so indescribable. And I remember in that time frame, before anyone else in the rest of the country knew who he was, just in LA, I remember watching men, women, and children weep seeing him. I remember the way that project swept like a blaze through Los Angeles, reigniting music in LA, reigniting culture in LA, but speaking to things in a way that had never been done, especially from an LA artist. Like I treasure those memories. It was an exceptional thing to witness. It was incredibly special. It speaks to the depth of who he is as a being. It speaks to the depth of the way that his mind operates. And it speaks to the depth of his service. I don't wish to say any of this in judgment because I have a lot of respect for Drake's talent. And as I stated earlier, I was a huge fan from the beginning of his talent and the way he put music together. So I don't want to disregard that or downplay that. But when I watch the Kendrick and Drake beef, I see misogyny, I see capitalism, I see materialism, I see surface, I see privilege, I see vacancy. I see an emptiness in Drake's music. That is my personal opinion. Which is not to say that it doesn't bop, which is not to say that it's not extremely danceable and that it sounds great in the car. But when I think about the things being said, it feels like fast food. It feels to me like things that I, as a woman, as an awakened being, am not interested in. I'm, as a listener, tired of hearing about women being mistreated in his music. I'm tired of hearing about partying on every single song or, being liked or, it's so egoic and so empty to me. When I see and hear a voice like Kendrick's, I see someone who every single album has been so incredibly, meticulously thoughtful about the level of impact that they're having, about song construction, about layers, about melody, about lyrics, about higher awareness, about healing. And I do understand that that kind of music isn't always for everyone, depending on where you're at in your life and your journey. And I think that's part of what the dynamic of music does in our world and our society. It soothes us. Sometimes it kind of satiates and pacifies us. And sometimes it activates us and enlivens us and brings forward revolution or brings forward an opportunity to release, to feel, to heal. And so watching that battle to me was kind of like it was already unequally yoked because they are just so incredibly different, even though they both are incredibly talented. But watching it, hearing it unfold, it was kind of this yin and yang fight. I want to get into the symbolism. I want to get into the depth of it. It felt like light and shadow. It also felt like, just like yin and yang, within light and shadow is further light and shadow. There's light in the dark and there's shadow in the light. And I think we saw a lot of that coming together. Some of the things that Kendrick brought up in what he was saying was so illustrative of the dynamic that is always kind of apparent, whether you are going to get caught up in what pacifies you or you're going to get caught up in what helps you feel and what makes you feel. And so I thought, some of the latter two records that they did were tough to hear, to be quite honest, as a fan. But also it was showing a dynamic that I think is really important. I'm not here to diagnose anybody, and we all have opinions and all the things, but there was a certain level of behavior that was being called out in Kendrick's song that I don't think just applies to Drake. I think it applies to a lot of people. And it is this air of narcissism and this lack of any social responsibility. And as someone that grew up in Los Angeles and as someone that has had a very complex lived experience, and as someone that serves, that has worked in the community in various ways over my entire career and adult life and child life, there were some things that really bothered me about the way that Drake approached this rap battle, because it felt like he was making fun of people that have trauma. And it felt like he was making fun of LA culture, which in theory, I understand if you don't have a deeper understanding of the world. But LA culture is so deserving of reverence. And I don't just mean the culture that you see on TV, right? And I'm not just talking about these hood glorified films like Menace to Society or Boys in the Hood or, whatever. And I'm not talking about Hollywood, and I'm not talking about Shaws of Sunset and the Kardashians and all the things. I'm talking about the fact that crack hit Los Angeles and was put in Los Angeles in underserved communities, and it changed the fabric and the structure of Black and brown households forever. It changed everything about the dynamic of what existed in LA, from family homes to, real community, into the riots and into the crack epidemic and into mass incarceration and into people who had no other choice but to be a part of, in some areas, a lot of broken families, and a lot of possibilities were limited in people's lives when these things happened. And around that, there were so many responses, and there were so many new creations and ways of being because of it that we continue to battle against. And so for someone that grew up incredibly privileged, who has said so themselves in various interviews, who grew up in a majority white environment in upper middle class areas, television star as a kid, access to great education, and none of these things are wrong. And all of these things are things that everyone really deserves: safety, right? Privilege, access, love. But to come from that vantage point and speak to someone else who they themselves and their family system and their greater community had to survive so much to exist, and still made art and still shows up in service and still gives back and still makes music to help people. For someone that comes from so much privilege and excess and gluttony and fame and overconsumption, from women to food to alcohol to whatever the things that are said in the songs, to poke fun through mimicking vocal tones and mimicking accents, to mimicking ways of life and hierarchical structures that are present in certain communities in LA. It's just outrageous. It's insane. It's bizarre how tone deaf Drake is to the rest of the world and to the suffering that people experience. And to even the line about, always rapping like you're trying to free the slaves. I mean, I pray so. If there are slaves, then we should all be trying to free them. Like, what do you mean? But it just really highlighted to me how much we celebrate, make rich, and edify people who have a severe deficit in the way they understand the world and the way they understand themselves and the way that they understand other people. And I think fundamentally it's a massive issue that we have always faced in society. It is this pedestaling of people without questioning character. And I'm not going to speak to any of, the allegations or the things that were specifically said about him and how, he relates to women and women of certain ages. But what I will say is, without even needing to do that, the contrast is so apparent. And so, when I think of like, now, of course, it's dialed down to like, what side are you on and who do you pick? It's less about the two of them as men. And for me, it's more about the greater story being told and the greater concepts that are being made available to us by witnessing that kind of epic battle unfold. And why we are talking about it and should be talking about it, which is, what is your real responsibility to the world when you have that much fame, that much access, and that much wealth? Drake very well and very clearly understands the power that he holds because of his fame and his talent and his wealth. And I don't believe he uses it to do anything other than edify himself and his own ego. And I don't respect that. I don't like that. I have a problem with that. And obviously, he can still do what he wants and make music, and there will still be millions upon millions of people that fund it and that love it, and that's fine. But we need to be looking at that. This isn't just a lyrical battle. This isn't just two guys that quote unquote have beef, right? This isn't Jay-Z and Nas. This is like us really looking at, what are we worshiping? Where are we giving away power? Where are we making ourselves weaker? Where are we empowering other people to cause harm? And I just think it's really, really important to think of it in that context. You might be listening to this and think I'm being a bit extreme, and I will take that because I am biased. I'm from Los Angeles, and I have an immense amount of love and respect for Kendrick and everything that he stands for and everything that he's accomplished. But I think it's just kind of indicative of some of the bigger things that we're exploring right now. There are bigger themes at play within our collective consciousness and within the way that we approach the world and the way that we put people in power. And whether that is governmental power or that's just power in terms of popularity, we should be expecting and requiring that people have integrity and they have character, and that they don't cause harm at the bare minimum, at the bare minimum, at the bare minimum. So that's my take on that. Kendrick's the GOAT all day, period, point blank. Let's just take a few deep breaths here. And I want to invite everyone, if it's safe and comfortable wherever you are, to take a deep breath in through your nose. And just hold it for a second after your belly and your chest are filled, and do a slow, full release. And we'll do that 2 more times here. Deep inhale through your nose, filling your belly first, rising to your chest, expanding. Hold the breath and release. And again, deep inhale. Hold. Release. And bring your hand to the center of your heart if it feels comfortable. And I want you to come deeply into the presence of your own body, of your own wisdom, of your own lived experience. And I want you to think about the way you show up for yourself in your life. And just hold that there for a second, whatever thoughts are populating that beautiful brain. I want you to take a moment to think about how you experience other people that you pay attention to and consume. Maybe that's on social media, maybe that's with music, maybe that's in your workspace, but I want you to just notice, who do you have your eyes on? Who are you aware of? Who do you find yourself observing, consuming, participating with? And as whatever names those are, whatever experiences those are, begin to kind of gently flood into your awareness, I want you to just put a little bit of a pin in them, a little bookmark there. And I want you to set the intention to look at them and to look at yourself with a cleansed lens of perception. And I want you to start thinking, what attracts you to them? What attracts you to their work? What attracts you to their style of being? And is there room to look at it a little bit more deeply and see if there is another pattern at play, whatever that may be? And see if the people that you have been connecting to in that way, if they still represent the best choice for you. Is there opportunity to kind of maybe now switch up some of the things that you think about and consume based on where you are on your journey and your level of consciousness? Is there maybe an opportunity to kind of gently lay off or edit any things that maybe don't nourish you or feed you or empower you? Just something to think about here. We always have the opportunity to bring our agreements up for review. And those agreements are not just our relationships with other people, the way we show up for them. It's also with everything we put into our lives and experiences. Just like we have to think about the things we put in our mouths and how it makes us feel and the reactions our body has to it. When we're on the path of higher consciousness, and if there is a little more sensitivity to the way you experience people and energy or your own healing, it's important to make edits with that same level of discernment. You may not have a stomach ache because of what you're consuming, but is there a numbness? Is there a heartache? Is there an exhaustion? And you don't have to judge it or you, but just bring it up for review and you'll make the choice for yourself. Another deep breath here. Deep breath in through your nose. Hold. And release. Thank you for joining me for this episode. Let me know what you think. Hit me on Instagram at Devi Brown. Tag me in a post, send me a DM, leave a comment. Much love always. Namaste.